Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar with FEI Twin Cities, Transforming Your Finance Organization from Report Creation to Drivers of Business Analysis. This course is being offered with CPE. So we'll advance to that slide. It is worth 1 continuing professional education credit. To get the credit, you must answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions and have a total viewing time of at least 50 minutes. CPE will be available 7 to 10 business days after the webinar, and we are unable to grant CPE credit in cases where technical difficulties preclude eligibility. And in accordance with the standards for the National Registry of CPE sponsors, CPE credits will be granted based on a 50-minute hour. So good morning, everybody. I'm Roseanne Bump. I'm the Executive Director with FEI Twin Cities. It's my pleasure to welcome all of our members, strategic partners, and guests here today. As you know, today's topic is transforming your finance organization. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to share a couple of FEI Twin Cities upcoming events. So next Tuesday, March 9th, we are hosting a session on Uber networking, specifically transforming into an Uber networker. We'll be covering networking tips for introverts and extroverts. What is networking and why is it important? And how to leave your new contacts with a wow. Then on March 18th, we have another in our DEI series, and it's taking action with a focus on mentoring and engaging. If you or anyone you know are looking for opportunities to get involved and give back or make a difference, this will highlight organizations focused on business and student mentoring. We hope to see you at these or other upcoming events. And there is more information on feitwincities.com. As many of you know, FEI is a nonprofit membership organization whose mission is to advance the success of senior finance professionals, their organizations, and the profession as a whole. We hope you'll invite other senior finance executives to join us at an upcoming event or learn more about membership. Before we jump into our session today, we'll push out our first poll, and that it is, do you wish to earn CPE credit for today's presentation? And I see that many of you have already answered, so I'm going to leave it up just for another couple seconds, and then we'll close that and get on to the presentation. All right, thank you. And Dave, you can go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate the quick introduction there. So today we are going to talk about transforming your finance organization. We're going to look at kind of move through a process of going from what traditionally we would see in finance organizations around report creation, kind of creating month-end statements, maybe doing analysis in more of an ad hoc fashion and supporting the business, into really becoming business analysts and really driving some of the strategic thinking within an organization. So we're going to walk through some different challenges that we see and then kind of how to move you there. So I'm Dave Duvarney. I am a principal within Baker Tilly Digital. My role here, I run our data and analytics practice. I have been in this space for about 20 years, helping organizations set up those capabilities and kind of drive them through. I've done everything from developing warehouses, running programs, to actually being hands-on keyboard and building some of the analytics that these organizations use. And I'll let Molly do her introduction.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Molly Gallmeyer. My role within Baker Tilly is I'm Director of Business Development. So I work with a lot of folks in the C-suite or kind of upper level management to talk through what areas they want to grow from a digital transformation perspective. A lot of that usually leads to data, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Fantastic. And Molly, talk for one more second and let me see if my audio can be better.
All right. As Dave's fixing his audio, I guess the other thing I would add, is that it'll be interesting. We definitely want to open this up for questions as we go along. If it makes sense to have questions throughout the presentation, I'll be monitoring those kind of behind the scenes, and I can tee them up for Dave. Otherwise, we can wait until the end. Again, as I said, I think one thing that I see in my role is a lot of organizations have a lot of the same frustrations and pain points around data. So hoping to have a good discussion about that towards the end of this presentation and see if we can help solve any quick fixes or give some ideas for solutions.
All right, I will try to speak clearly, and if I'm not heard, let me know. I'll try to watch the chat window as I talk. So first thing we wanted to talk about really quick is just kind of what is happening as it relates to, when we talk about reports, we really are talking about data and analytics. I mean, they are one form of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to discussing maturity. But the reality is the movement to the usage of data has increased significantly in the last probably 10 years. Not that it hasn't been around. We've had decision support systems and all these other things in the past. But the tools and technologies that we have to really drive insights from data is consistently changing and shifting and growing as the technology moves forward. So here we have just a little bit of information from Gartner. By 2022, 30% of chief data officers will partner with the CFO. And really, when we talk about that partnering, it's not so much a partnering to say, okay, finance, what do you need? It is really to look at finance and say, how are we leveraging this data as sometimes we'll talk about as an asset, or to provide, a better way to say it is to provide economic value to the organization. And there is a movement afoot in some areas around data and analytics to really look at the information that we have as an asset and not just something that we use operationally. I mean, you can think about companies like Uber or Facebook. I mean, they all live and die on data, but even traditional organizations like airlines are really driving a lot of what's happening in their transformation through the use of information. So first thing we want to cover is we want to talk about what are some of the key challenges that we see as it relates to data and as it relates to the finance organization. So we're going to talk about the sources of information a little bit. We're going to talk about the quality of data, and then we're going to talk about culture, because a lot of this is going to go beyond the tools. It's going to go beyond the thing that you build, but really how are you going to use that thing, that element that you stand up in your organization. So the first major challenge to anyone who's really trying to drive economic value from data is that there's just a wealth of it. We have moved way beyond looking at, if we were taking maybe a traditional manufacturing organization and saying, we want to look at our ERP system and we want to know what sales are. We can do that. Most organizations have reached that level of maturity where they understand where their business is coming from and what are some of those key drivers. Really, what we want to get to is looking at what are some of those pieces of information outside of the organization that'll also help us drive our business. You can do things like, now I know through certain organizations, you can take a client or a customer and you can look at their financial picture and how they fit in against other clients, other competitors that work in their space. You can pull that external data in. You can see here, this is the list of what happens every minute of the day on the internet and just the volume of data that's created, right? 72 hours of videos uploaded to YouTube, 3,472 images to Pinterest. This is happening every minute. The data that we're getting is huge. It's coming from connected devices. If we think about healthcare and the things that we can get from a watch that we wear, all the way down to maybe the devices that we're now installing in our cars to better inform insurance providers about our driving habits. Connected devices are creating a wealth of data. Communications is creating a wealth of data. If we have chats, if we have email messages, there are services now that are mining those to then drive insights about our customers or our clients. If we wanted to look and say, hey, based on the feedback that I'm getting from a customer coming into my request system, or maybe I'm seeing messages on social media, I might want to reach out, or maybe I have an issue that I need to deal with. Same thing from the different services. As we go and we launch our own services or we create digital assets ourselves, we're starting to get back data in those scenarios. So it's not just that there's data and we have to model it and use it. It's that the amount of data that we are now getting is significantly larger. And that presents a technical challenge, but also a little bit of a business challenge to say, how do I actually value this and how do I drive value from it? The second piece here is common and has been around forever. Data is not clean. It's never clean. A lot of times when we jump into an organization and they really want to dive into analyzing what they're doing, we have to spend a significant amount of time in the cleanup effort and actually just getting things sorted. So this is a challenge that we're going to see over and over. In the quality of the data. I don't know how many organizations I go into, and you can ask 3 or 4 different people, hey, what do you mean by sales? And you're going to get 3 or 4 different answers. So there's still some challenges that we have to address around the quality of the data that we're going to provide from an analytical perspective. And then kind of the last major challenge that we wanted to highlight today is really the challenge of creating a data literate organization. A lot of organizations, as they mature, as they change ownership, the desire to use data to inform decisions has increased, but it comes with the challenge that there are people who have made their way in an organization, who have driven their careers of understanding the business, understanding the way things work. They didn't have the data at their fingertips at the time. And sometimes will feel threatened. They'll feel threatened by an increase in information that comes out. Some people might feel threatened if they were, especially from a finance perspective. I've seen this in finance organizations. You might have individuals who have spent their entire career creating the reports and the analysis that the business uses, and then to turn that over to them and say, well, now you can do this yourself. You can grab the information, you kind of democratize that data. That can be a difficult thing for some people, and they don't want to give up some of that control. I mean, information is absolutely a control point. So we have to change, recognize that there is a cultural shift that has to happen around data to actually get people to embrace that, to leverage it and become a more data-driven organization. I tease about it sometimes. The first internship that I ever did, I was the manual data input person. I got a stack of green bar papers about 3 inches thick on my chair the first Monday of the month. And I had to sit and page through certain things and put them in a spreadsheet and then distribute it. That kind of stuff doesn't have to happen anymore. So that role that I was playing is no longer there, but hopefully we start to drive towards a higher purpose in what we're doing from an analytical perspective and really where we're going to go and talk today. All right, so let's jump into the first polling question. We want to talk about challenges. How would you describe the level of quality of your organization's data? So is it beautiful, pretty data, totally integrated, no problems? Is it great, but seems to be a little bit of a mess? Everybody else's data is a mess, but you've got it under control, or is it complete chaos?
Thank you, Dave. We'll just allow a few more seconds for everybody to get a chance to answer. Looks like we've got a couple more coming in. All right, and I think we can go ahead and close that poll. We're going to show you the results.
Ah, interesting. Okay, it flashed up quick, but I think I saw it. There we go. My data is great, but everyone else seems to be living in a mess. Perfect. So 68%, and that makes sense. And only 3% have beautifully integrated data. I think that really is, especially from a finance perspective, I think that feels spot on with what we see when we're out talking to clients. Finance does have their data under control. I mean, finance's core function, right, is to balance the books, to get those things, to be the correct stewards of the resources of the organization. And I think from that vantage point, finance does have a very good handle on what's happening in the business and pushing that forward. The issue comes from everybody outside who maybe wants to drive something at a level deeper, they have difficulty doing that because maybe they have the financials, but they don't have some of the operating metrics that are going to drive what they need to do in the business. So that makes a lot of sense, kind of given what who the audience is and where those polling questions fell. All right, let's talk about then what's the impact on the office of the CFO? What are we seeing today, and how are those challenges kind of manifesting themselves? And then after that, we'll get into the opportunities. So first and foremost, just like I mentioned a second ago with the polling questions, the CFO really is the financial steward for the organization to make sure that the funds and the capital that we have to deal with are well cared for and moved and used in the appropriate fashion. I think what we're seeing now is that the CFO office, even a little more than IT, is becoming some of the stewards of some core data assets. And really, those are the financial assets, some of the business operating assets. You still might have some data assets around marketing and sales. Manufacturing can have a lot of their own. And we're talking about a manufacturing scenario. But some of those core assets about how did the business operate, those are living with the CFO. And we need to take these external pieces, marketing data, manufacturing data, other pieces that are out there, and start to see how those kind of coalesce and come together. The other piece here, the CFO is really there to drive some of that integration into those financial results, right? What are the things, what are the drivers that are happening in some of these outside areas that are impacting those financial results? Those insights have to be actionable. So this is another piece that's changing in the CFO organization. The time, and we'll talk more about time lag in a little bit, but the time lag of when you need to be able to deal with information and create action on it is getting shorter. And we've seen this a lot. We have clients that we were, like most, when COVID hit, we're super concerned with, are we going to survive this? What's going to happen to our business? And we saw many of our clients kind of fall back onto their data and analytics programs to say, look, I need to know in a much tighter window, am I doing well or not? So that is something that we're going to see from the CFO organization going forward. And then the last piece is really the CFO being a key decision maker, a key driver in those big picture elements with the CEO and driving those elements forward using data versus gut feel, instinct, really taking it from a complete data picture. Another change that's happening within the CFO office is the employees that are coming into finance, and we see this pretty significantly with the audit and tax folks that we're pulling out of universities. They have significantly higher data analytics skills than they did in the past. I myself graduated a while ago with my accounting degree, took the CPA exam. I can't think of a single analytical tool that I used during my program as an accountant. Coming out today, though, you're seeing these mix of programs coming out of the universities where they're actually, the master's in accounting includes a data analytics element. I threw 5 universities down here just as examples, kind of quick research on who is offering these programs, but people are coming out not just with the finance skills and understanding, audit, tax, the financial statements, but they're also understanding how to use tools like a Power BI, a Tableau, maybe even to the depths of being able to do statistical modeling in something like R or Python. So those skills are coming out. That's another big change for the CFO office. And then the last one is this notion of the citizen developer. So the citizen developer, it really highlights that individual that can create their own solutions. So I mentioned just previously in the slide about these university programs coming out and people knowing Tableau and Power BI. Many of those tools would be considered citizen developer tools. So maybe I need to take a step back and what does that mean? Citizen developer tools are either low code or no code solutions that allow a typical business user with a good understanding of the processes of the business to go in and either one, create applications. There are plenty of tools out there where again, low code, no code, can create an entire web portal for an organization, or creating dashboards, reports, and insights. All the tools like Tableau, Power BI, Click, and there are oodles of them, were really created to support that notion of the citizen developer. I can remember Microsoft put Power BI out about 5 years ago, and I sat in a room probably 12 years ago now with some of the Microsoft team where they were talking about this tool they wanted to create to enable the Excel users to do data and analytics solutions. As a developer at the time, I thought, well, that's crazy. How are they going to build all these applications for us? But they knew there were 500 million Excel users, and they knew that that was an untapped market. And so they wanted to create new tools for them. And they did, in the example of Power BI, and again, a lot of others to follow. So the citizen developer is really the end user there. They have no code, they're working individually, they're building their own solutions, and they need to be an integrated part of what's happening in IT, but at the same time, they are going to use these tools to get the job done and to move things forward in the way that they need to. So this is another change that's coming to the CFO office that I think people need to be aware of and cognizant of, and embrace. We need to embrace the citizen developer with training, support, intersection with IT to say, look, we're going to get great ideas out of our people. Let's make sure we give them the tools to do that, the insights they're going to drive from it. And then if that becomes a good corporate or enterprise level solution, we'll bring that back in the enterprise. So 3 big things that we're seeing from the CFO office. 1, really driving at being the strategic center of data within the organization. So a lot of key decisions going through there and relying on new data from the CFO. I think you're seeing new energetic individuals coming in with heavy data and analytics skills, and the tool sets that are available for you to actually do that analysis are significantly easier to use and easier to adopt than they were in the past. All right, let's move on to our next polling question. So what's the main impact you're seeing as a finance exec? Are you being asked to provide more detailed analytics? Are you hiring people with more advanced degrees or more of a deep desire to really dive deeper into the data? Or are you seeing people actually building some of their own tools?
Thank you, Dave. We'll allow a few more seconds so everyone has a chance to answer. All right, looks like the majority of people have answered. We're going to go ahead and share those results.
Perfect. So higher percentage of being asked to provide more detailed analysis, would agree. And then also they're supporting the analytical needs for sure, building your own applications. That actually relates, we do have one question I'll answer quick in the window here regarding, the question is regarding citizen developer movement. Do you see the ERP systems allow more open reporting development to address these opportunities? I would say maybe. So there are so many ERP systems and so many solutions out there that I think, yes, some of them are allowing it, but I wouldn't say that what I've seen is that holistic. And let me take that maybe a little bit deeper. Most ERP packages will have some level of reporting that you can do, and some will even have what we would consider ad hoc capabilities within those ERP systems. The problem generally is kind of twofold. One, a limited number of users really understand what's happening to that data underneath and how it moves. I mean, that can be as simple as, I've worked in environments where we looked at invoices and invoice lines, and you had to understand specific codes about the business to understand what constituted a return, right? So the business rules and logic that sit underneath usually reside within a smaller number of people. So that's challenge one with reporting out of the ERP. Number two is that you usually don't just want ERP data, you want something else. So I don't think that the ERP vendors themselves are necessarily making the analytics easier, but what I do see is the tools, again, and I'm just picking on Power BI, Tableau, and Click, they are creating significantly broader connectors into those systems. So accessing the data is becoming easier, and they allow us to create a semantic model that we can then publish to the business. So that's really where the citizen developer comes in, is using some of these new data visualization and analytics tools to connect to multiple sources to provide insights back to the business. And there's some integration with ERP solutions, but it really is kind of all over the board. All right. So the next section, I wanted to talk about where are we going to move to what's a strategic approach to move us forward? And we're going to talk about that within the context of analytical maturity and what are the elements that have to drive into that analytical maturity. So the first piece here, this is our analytical maturity model. There are numerous of these models out there that we see, and they evolve over time. And what they're trying to really demonstrate is that you cannot buy a tool or implement a solution and jump to a high level of analytical maturity. We're going to talk about what we think the components of strategy are here in a second. But there are 4 kind of core components that have to move you across that maturity spectrum. It does not happen through a single project. It does not happen in a matter of months. It generally is a transformation that takes a significant amount of time to move an entire organization forward, right? And especially, again, the transformations that I've seen, the deepest transformations I've seen in the CFO office, one, have never finished. They continue to this day, but they took several years to kind of get to an advanced level of maturity. It's like growth. You have to have some patience in growth. But what's happening across the maturity spectrum, and the way I like to usually describe this, when we think about data and analytics and our journey, what we're doing is moving from looking backwards to looking forwards. If we think about traditional reporting and analytics or financial statement preparation, that is very hindsight driven. What were my financials last month? We actually get them here at the firm. We get a flash financial. I think I got my February flash financials yesterday, which is great, makes me feel good. But the reality is 3 months after, or 3 days after the month closes, or 5 days or whatever it is, it's not fast enough anymore. I need to know at the beginning of the month, or really on a weekly basis, what's happening to my team. Are they productive? Did somebody come off of a project? Why are the hours not where they're supposed to be? If I think of a manufacturing scenario, same thing. Why did the production of this machine fall off? Why did my open orders fall off? We can't wait till the end of the month to kind of look back and see what happened. So the first part of the maturity curve is having a good handle on hindsight. Can we look backwards? Can we see what it is? Is it clean, consistent, and is everybody communicating correctly? The second piece then is moving into, all right, now that I know what happened, I want to drive into why did it happen? So this gets us into more of an analytical scenario. And I would say, in my perspective, most organizations are kind of teetering between hindsight and insight. I would put, if we had to bell curve organizations, most of them are kind of right between these two. The insight element is really being able to do ad hoc analytics. It is to be able to say, oh, my sales are down. Okay, were they down in a specific region? Were they down by a specific product? If they were down by a product, was there a specific salesperson that I lost that was selling and is not selling? That kind of, why did it happen? Human-driven interaction is that second phase. Once we have that down, so we know all these inputs in why they push us to see what happened to an organization or why it happened, then we move into more of the predictive scenario. So think of this as things like customer retention. well, I knew these are all the contributing factors to why a customer might leave. Now I'm going to run these through a machine learning algorithm that will predict if some other customer is starting to get to some of those thresholds that would then drive them to leave. So maybe I'm seeing a decrease in their monthly spending, or I'm seeing an increase in their calls to a help center. All these things that in the past, doing kind of the second phase of insight, helped me drive out why somebody left. Now I'm using it to predict before they leave so I can actually act upon it. The fourth level and kind of the highest level is when we really are letting the machines, it might sound scary sometimes if you watch post-apocalyptic stuff like I do, we're letting the machines drive out what happens. So if a customer, if the machine then, we've built the algorithms, we can identify when a customer is going to leave. In the last piece, the amplified intelligence, the machine might then already just automatically kick them some offer back to say, we need you to stay. We'd like you to stay. Hey, we saw you were unhappy with this call, so here's a 10% off coupon. And those things are happening. The notion of that right-hand side of the maturity spectrum, I mean, those are happening today. If I visit a site, I was looking the other day at solo stoves, and I abandoned something in my cart. I left it there. I'm not quite ready to buy the new little campfire solo stove yet, but I want to. But I left it there. A couple days later, I get an email that says, hey, you want 10% off? Or if I visit that site again, it picks up my cookie and says, hey, we got a $10 off thing running right now. They're using machine learning and more of this amplified intelligence to drive me back to a purchasing decision. Nobody's sitting back there going, oh, Dave left something in his cart, I should leave him an offer. They're driving that through the machine. The machine is pushing that.
There was a question in the chat, Dave, but I don't know if we wanted to wait until the end. Talking about, and again, this is something that feel free to address at the end, but about McNamara fallacy and when decisions are based on numbers versus qualitative focus, or excuse me, qualitative focus.
Say that one again. I missed it. I see the other question that's here. Say that one again.
So the one question is regarding McNamara fallacy, which is decisions based solely on numbers and all the qualitative factors are ignored. So doing this makes us kind of blind at what's going on. And I think it's interesting as you talk through the maturity model and kind of where people are, it really is focused more on the numbers. What are your thoughts on the qualitative factors and things that maybe we're not looking at specifically in the data?
100%. There's absolutely room. And a lot of people, when they'll talk about machine learning or artificial intelligence, and I put it more squarely in that machine learning camp, there is an element of this piece that no, the machine can't purely make those decisions based on the data that comes in. At some point, you do want somebody to come in from a qualitative perspective and have that human interaction. So when you, maybe even as you move further along the spectrum, there's a discussion about kind of the human machine interaction to kind of drive those decisions. You could think of this like, again, in a manufacturing facility kind of scenario. We did a exercise where we were calculating OEE and we needed to know machine uptime information. Well, the machine would alert when we hit to given thresholds, but the operator might have slowed down the machine for good reason. So the operator could sit there and say, nope, I did that on purpose, and then let it go. And they might have to put a reason in, but they would go. And that's just one example. I think high level decision-making from data is not gonna happen from the machine. It's gonna happen from an individual. But simple behavioral elements like I abandoned something in my shopping cart, maybe I should send them an offer. Those are the kind of decisions I think that we're going to see amplified with machine learning. And there was another one in here when it says, when I talk about machines, would you include the capabilities of Power and Tableau in there? Yes and no. So in some sense, Tableau and Power BI are really data visualization tools. When you go back a little bit, there's some modeling elements in there. But when I talk about machines, it's really machine learning and statistical algorithms that then do either the predicting or bucketing. Those tools have some capabilities, but when you dive deeper, there are other tools that integrate with them that will drive out more of the advanced analytics side. All right, so I talked about maturity. I want to move on to talk about what are kind of the elements of strategy. When we talk about data and analytics strategy, we talk about 4 areas that need to be addressed. So one is the people side. And I talked about this really early as kind of a cultural challenge. And maybe this even gets into the kind of effect of, data coming in, but are people making the decisions? One, we have to, from a people side, we have to enable them. We have to enable them to use the technology, but we also have to empower them to make decisions based on it. So again, it's not just turning over the keys and let some algorithm decide it, but we want to enable and empower the individual, and we have to be conscious of that. We also have to be good about the communication that we're going to use. So as we implement these data and analytics solutions, we have to be good about the communications to the individuals and how that is or isn't going to impact them. The one I think about the most is, and it does fall a little bit more on the organization side, but when I think about people is if we start to measure their jobs, right, we have to give some really deep consideration into what is that going to do to impact either hopefully positively, but not negatively what their behavior is. So we need a good communication plan in there as we put those metrics out. Guarantee anything you measure, somebody's going to push on how to push that system to their benefit. We have to know that intrinsically. So we have to be conscious of it and just communicate really what our intentions are and why we want to change things. Process side is also another big element of creating a good data and analytics strategy. You have to plan. If you do these things ad hoc as they come, you will quickly drown in the requests. We have a concept, it's an agile concept called tech debt. I shouldn't say it's an agile concept, but an agile concept of tech debt. If you just let requests come at you, you will quickly be consumed with it without any planning to actually go and address those big items. So sometimes you have to take a step back, plan forward the things that you're going to create, and then eliminate some of that noise in the tech debt. You have to have governance. So as new data elements come in, as people are creating reports, what is the governed body of data? What are those elements? And it can't be everything, but you have to have some core elements that are governed. You have to have high quality data in the process, all those around process. From an organization perspective, you have to have buy-in from the top down. If you don't have executive level buy-in to create some of these things, not that they won't work, but they're not going to get broad traction. You might have departmental wins that then you demonstrate up and then get buy-in across. That we've absolutely seen and worked with, but you want to get that sponsorship. You need the organization to understand that this isn't a project. It needs to be very agile. We're going to present data kind of back to the maturity curve. We're going to present data. We're going to learn from that data, and then we're going to move forward. So things might change. It shouldn't be our core things, how we define sales, but we're going to enhance and add to and kind of build and recreate all the time. And we have to have a vision for where this is going to go, right? Why are we doing this? What are we trying to do? Are we just trying to operate better? Are we trying to actually create economic value with our data and maybe go into an entirely different area of business? Those are all valid elements. And then what I really think is, maybe because I'm the technology guy, the part that's less difficult is the actual technology element of it. If I know how I'm impacting people, what the processes are to get it done, and the organizational vision to do it, putting in new technologies is becoming easier and easier. We can stand up what used to be difficult environments to build, to house and model and manage all this data. We can stand those up now in minutes or days, depending on the solutions that we use. So that's not hard. But from a technology perspective, we have to understand how we're going to support this going forward. Does it align to our current technology vision? And what are some of those investments that we are going to make going forward? And how large are they? How big are they? So those are our core pillars of strategy. Once you've kind of gone through the core pillars of strategy, you start to talk about prioritization. So again, if we're putting in a data and analytics capability, we're trying to move across that maturity curve, there is no way we're going to do every element of the business all at once. This is kind of change management 101. There's no way we can do everything and impact the entire business all at once. That is probably a recipe for failure. What you have to do is drive down into prioritization. So when we go in and talk about strategy capabilities, we try to get organizations, one, to create that core set of data elements or business domains that they want to measure and really drive some economic value from. And then we go through a very objective scoring process around that to say, look, what's the impact of this? So if you were going to measure this, is it going to increase our profits? Is it going to meet the organizational goals? Is it going to reduce costs, right? How is this, are there a large number of users that actually would be impacted by this? So what's the business impact? And then what's the technical feasibility? Are you talking about data that doesn't even exist? I mean, we've had customers where we've had to walk them back. They say, look, we want to take sentiment analysis from Twitter and Google and all these things and pull it together, and that'll tell us where we need to go get new members. Like, okay, great. Do you know how much those members spend today? Well, no, we can't really analyze that yet. Okay, well, we got to start there. So we look at that technical feasibility of, does the data exist? How hard is it to get? Is the quality high? It might drive out other initiatives, but we need to know that. The intersection of that, high impact to the business, technical feasibility is high. That puts us into that quadrant one, and those are the things that we want to focus on and start to address. And to be honest, there might be some things that you say, look, I know it's painful for you to go after this data once a month, but you're the only one who uses it. And yes, it's important to our business, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not top of the list, and we need to move it down. And those are just good qualitative discussions to have. In building a framework to get to that, those two axes is extremely beneficial when we move these forward. And then the last piece, and I'll show you an example of how this all comes together. Once you have the priorities laid out, then you want to attack them in a very agile fashion. Again, ways that most organizations fail at this, they try to take on some big data warehousing, data lake initiative. It's going to take 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, you're going to have something amazing. It doesn't work. You have to deliver value to the business in a agile fashion. We are huge advocates of doing agile development and quick release cycles. We believe that if you want to tackle a domain with the right amount of people, generally in 3 months, you can get to something. Once you have that up and running, and I have been in these environments where we literally are rolling out new analytics, new capabilities, new features and functions every 2 weeks on a consistent basis. When we get all those noisy requests from the business that are coming, lots of them, we can prioritize them in a good process. We can say, hey, we know this is important. Our sprint ends, we'll get it to you. You'll have it in 2 weeks. Most people are okay with that. Very few of those requests came to just a complete emergency and we need to stop what we're doing. Teams get efficiencies from it. We can move a lot faster through it. The other output of it, when you have a really good agile process to delivering these things, because like I said, this isn't a project, this is a capability or a program you're going to create in your organization. When you're very agile, you can actually, we've done this, you get to the point of saying, look, here are all the things that the business wants to do, and this is our level of capacity. You stack rank which things need to go first, everything underneath. Unless we get more capacity or something moves at the top, we can't do it. And we can prove it by our velocity and what we've created in the past and how much exists going into the future. So we have nice quantity. It's not just, well, go faster. We can actually prove it out and say it. And it just creates a lot less stress and sets a much better expectation within the organization. This is an example tool that we've used to kind of facilitate an organization through some of this. It's an analytics strategy canvas. So if you've ever seen a lean business canvas, it kind of runs in the same vein. Within this, we look at, what's the organization look like, the individual we're talking about, what are their goals and objectives? And we really start at that goal and objective, line it to a KPI. How ready are they? So this goes back to our process piece that we had, the 4 elements of strategy. What is the capability we think they need? And then the solution to get them there. So just an example, way to kind of drive and facilitate an organization from maybe what feels like chaos, or back to our first polling question, everybody else is a mess except me, helping them facilitate through into what a good solution is going to be. All right, let's do I think this is our last polling question on which of the pillars in your organization likely needs the most attention. Is it the people, the process, the organization, vision, agility, and sponsorship, or the technology? And then Molly, we're going to have to go a little bit quick through the case studies.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone. We'll just allow a couple more seconds here so everyone gets a chance to answer. I do want to encourage people to go ahead and post questions in the Q&A box if there is something that you would like to have covered, and we'll get to as many of those as we can.
All right, process, planning, governance, and quality. Yep, we see that quite often. Again, I think it's taking that step back. If you ever work with me for a long period of time, you'll hear me preach cadence and feedback all the time, right? We're going to move faster if we have a good cadence to how we operate. The process planning element of that is very true. And then again, back to kind of data governance, master data management. These are concepts that sometimes the tool vendors will want to gloss over. They'll say, oh, don't worry about it. The citizen developer can build all this stuff. It'll be fine. But you really quickly can run into master data and governance problems. So those are there. There's one question in the box. I'll answer that quick and then let Molly jump into these.
It's a perfect segue to our case studies.
Yeah. In the process of developing and executing your strategy towards analytical maturity, typically owned, sponsored by the CFO, CIO, or both. And I would lean more towards both. And one of the things that we generally do within a strategy, somebody will be the driver, but usually what we're going to do when we create a capability is we're going to say, here's the sponsor group, here's the executive steering committee that's going to drive this, because you need them. And then we have some other roles in the middle that help facilitate them into what are those priorities in that line in the sand, and then drive it down. All right.
So I'll quickly go through some real life examples and areas where we've actually implemented some of the things that Dave talked about today. So this is a situation. Van Holden's is a smaller organization. They actually make pickle in a pouch. I'm sure you've all seen them at gas stations. I know I've consumed them myself. And in this organization, this was really driven by the CEO and the CFO, because essentially what they did was they had purchased a tool and they didn't have a good kind of data strategy or data model to use the tool. So they thought, well, we have this tool, it should solve everything. They weren't getting the data that they needed or the reports necessary to run the business successfully through their ERP. So we came in, we helped define where the pain points were, get the business requirements in order to help have better visibility into their sales funnel and how their sales teams were doing, and allow their sales teams to be able to sell better and more efficiently. Long story short, we were able to go in, build a data model, put a tool on top, and solve the issue. So this isn't necessarily something for every organization, but as you can see, they only had 72 employees. And I think the big thing here is, as Dave mentioned, when we talk about data and we talk about all the elements, it's a program, not a project. And so for these folks here, they weren't able to really go through the whole kit and caboodle of implementing a program because they didn't have people to maintain it. So we solve the problem with kind of a size solution for their team to be able to build a model that was conducive for the CFO to maintain and then have their sales force use. Anything you would add, Dave? Awesome. So the next example, again, was also driven by finance. This, as you can see, is a much larger organization. So we have 578 employees. And essentially, the pain started within finance, but I think this is a great example of a bigger picture. Again, it kind of talks through that maturity curve that Dave talked about. So we went into Highsight here. We helped them develop the strategy around what they need to do and how they need to prioritize to really build out that data program. They were getting some quick wins with some tools that they had purchased internally to show the power of data and show that, if we had more of this, we could probably run the business better, more efficiently, which we find that a lot. We see that it's often a very, once one team gets it, more and more teams want it if it's implemented and rolled out correctly. And so I think the big thing here is we came in, we really helped advise as far as where they need to go, how they need to start building out their data program. We helped build out a lot of the foundational components, as Dave said, in that agile fashion, to get some quick wins along the way with 2-week iterations. And now the really exciting thing with this organization is they've started to post jobs to build out their data program internally. So they've realized the power and the impact that they're willing to, say, okay, we've got some great lessons from a consulting organization. Now we need to make that investment internally early and continue this for the long haul, because they know it's not a, once Baker Tilly leaves, it's done. It's something that they can continue to do and build, which that's what we want to see. That's a huge win in our book.
Yeah, and they had implemented from a financial planning perspective, they had implemented adaptive insights, and that got them to the next level. And then they realized, like, hey, we need to go much deeper than what we're doing here in the planning cycle. So they are maturing. I mean, it's a multi-year journey. One other comment I would make here, kind of again related to the CFO suite, we worked directly with the CFO to say, how are we developing and crafting the message that this needs to go forward as an organizational capability? Because he was new to the organization. He was really trying to convince them to take a step forward. And we helped with a lot of the presentations and material and talking points to drive that. And the ROI case, right? To say, hey, you're going to ask for a significant investment. What is the return going to look like as you move this forward? And we've done that in a handful of cases. It's always an interesting exercise to go through from a data perspective.
I would just add, since then, in addition to kind of those and not entry, but mid-level implementers for the data program, they've also hired they've added a CIO to the team, as well as a VP, to help drive this initiative. So again, they saw the value and saw that as much as the CFO was championing, the champion at the beginning, as Dave said, it's a two-way street. So they need that CIO in there to help balance the efforts that the CFO was doing to really continue the program for success.
Yep. All right. So we talked about kind of what are those core challenges around data quality, the amount of data, the change in culture. We moved through those. We talked about what are some of the changing trends within the CFO organization. So again, being more engaged in those strategic decision makings, looking back, we're also driving deeper into the data, higher talent coming out with more analytical skills, and the notion of the citizen developer kind of moving forward. Then we moved into the strategic approach and kind of how to get there, really looking at it holistically, people, process, organization, and the technology, moving across that maturity spectrum, setting your prioritization, and then going through it in an agile fashion. So that's what we had today. I know we answered questions as we went along, but if there are other ones.
There was one more question. There was one more question, just to comment a bit about data governance and best practices.
Yeah, so data governance is, best practices is to develop a data governance program, and that can be big or small. It really relies on kind of setting a scope for what that's going to be. We've worked on kind of larger data governance programs related to insurance, where you have heavy regulatory requirements. That's very much like a change process of, you can't change this piece of data. We need to know what it is because we need to report it from a regulatory perspective. We have also done it on small scales of, let's just document and catalog what you have, where's the best place to go get it and access it. So best practice, it's an entire kind of area of study, and deciding what's right for the organization is going to depend a lot on what are the needs of that organization. Other questions? All right. Well, here are contact information for Molly and I. If you have any other additional questions on any of this subject matter, or just want to talk about it further, we are happy to discuss it and see where you're at.
Yeah, thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Molly. We do have one more polling question, and then we will go ahead and end the webinar. So thank you everyone for attending, and we'll launch that poll in just a minute.
I was waiting for the poll to say, did Dave jump around too much in a crazy fashion?
No, you did great. And maybe there was one other question that came in, and it was on the use of technology such as data warehousing. or
Yeah.
BI apps. Can you address that maybe while we wait to get that poll launched?
Yeah. In my opinion, you know, we could do a whole other session on talking about like enterprise level analytics and departmental level analytics. Tools like Power BI and Tableau and the citizen developer are great for building departmental level analytics, right? They fit a need, we should encourage them, and we should help people do it. When you start to talk about the enterprise and kind of that best practices back to governed, there needs to be generally centralized places of information. And even if that's just the master customer record and what is the correct information there, key financial metrics, some of those things need to be governed. And I do believe that they would live in a data warehouse or some other structure that is basically meant for that purpose. Don't get to see a lot of terms out there sometimes: data lakes, data warehouse, data lakehouse, data mesh. At the end of the day, they are all the same thing of consume data, integrate it, and put it into a consistent format that the users can create, can use. And I think it is a key element for a mature organization.
Terrific. Thank you so much, you guys. And I guess we have done all the polls that we need to do today. So thank you, Molly. Thank you, Dave, for your time. Just so everybody knows too, we will be issuing CPE. So look for that to be released in the next 7 to 10 days. We'll also be sending out an email to all the registrants with the recording, the slide deck, and also contact information for Molly and Dave. So if you do need additional information, please feel free to follow up with them. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.